All right. Hit that got it button as well. All right, we'll get started in about one more minute. Good afternoon or good evening. If you can, I'm not gonna force anyone. Be great for if you can turn your camera on. That would be awesome. I feel like I've seen your names in the group so much, but if you can't, totally fine. Totally fine. We'll get started here in just a minute. See who else is going to be joining us this evening. Glad to see. I see Sarah. See Devonna, Kat, Fireflies, maybe Steven.
I'm showing my age, but now I'm having like a romper room flashback.
I recognize a couple of these names here. Devonna, I think I might know you. Hello, welcome. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome, Kat.
Yeah, Lenita. Good afternoon, good evening. Kind of depends on where you are in the country, but I also know we have quite an international group as well. So a lot of times when I run webinars, I have folks from all over the world, and so it's really great because I'll usually say good afternoon, and someone to say like, hey, it's morning here, and wherever they are. Like I get a lot from Asia and or the Middle East. So all right, more folks joining us. Welcome, welcome. All right, Sarah. Hey, I see you there. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for coming.
I apologize. It was sort of a last minute, so I might have to jump out at some point, but I just really wanted to hear what everyone had to say. So I'm excited that you're recording.
We are. I see Christopher. I see you joined us. Welcome, Teresa.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having this. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks for being here. This is great. This is great. Thank you for being here. Well, we'll go ahead. I want to honor the time. I'm sure we might have a couple more folks joining us here, but just kind of get us kicked started here and say welcome again. My name's David. I'm David from the Principal's Desk. And so thanks so much for being here. Been really, really excited to kind of get this thing going here. If you've been in the Principal's Desk for a while, you've seen it grow like exponentially over the last couple of years, especially over this last year. It's been crazy to keep up with on my end. It's been quite a undertaking here. And as it's grown, I've thought about so many different ways that we could create such a larger community and actually bring educators from around the country and really around the world together in kind of forums like this, and then some other things that I'm excited to share with you a little later on here. But as you all know, as your educators in our busy world, and I'm still an educator, I still teach, although I'm in higher ed now and I do things at ed tech and consulting. Finding the time has been really, really challenging to kind of get all these things going here. And I was lucky enough to have two individuals reach out to me who have helped me kind of cultivate kind of what this might look like here. And so I do want to introduce Heidi and Jennifer, who are on the call as well. And see, they just waved. And they're going to really help kind of get this community going in a vastly different way as we continue to grow. We're going to have some events like this, some exciting news that I'll share a little later on about things that might be coming up here. But really just, this is really just the tip of the iceberg and the starting point for where the Principal's Desk is going to go. So really, really happy and excited. Thanks so much for being here. And maybe Heidi and Jennifer, I'll kind of toss it over to you real quick and see if you have anything you want to say to get us started.
Sure. Thank you, David. I was going through my cell phone and Facebook messengers, and I realized it was back on November 20th of last year where I had pinged you and said, hey, what you're doing is pretty amazing and would love to support you and amplify this work. And really, really grateful that you're so open, and it's so refreshing to work with someone who shares similar visions, and looking forward to growing with you and getting to know so many people in your community. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about that, but just really expressing my sincerest gratitude to helping make all of this possible. Heidi?
Yeah, hi everyone. So glad to see so many of you here, and that you found your way on Facebook and on Zoom as well. It's really exciting for me to be able to do this work. I'm a 12-year educator. I taught in elementary school, And my big passion is really supporting all people that are in schools. So, the teachers, the staff, the community, and the bottom line is always the students. And so to be able to have a group of educators come together and share ideas and concerns and really support each other and, hey, this worked for me, or, oh, I'm going to try that, I think is a fantastic idea. And so partnering up with David has been a real joy for me to be able to, spread healthy schools around the country. And today I do mostly consulting with schools and districts to support that. And anything I can do to help our system improve is always a fun thing for me.
And before we get started, I don't know if people realize that at the bottom there are reactions, and there's also a place to put chat. So you can put chat comments down at the bottom. And if something is said that resonates, especially since this is being recorded, if you put a heart or, want to celebrate something, that will actually give us some feedback too, to say, oh, like we hit upon something that really resonates, and we will be using all of your reactions and comments to give you more of what you want. So I just thought I'd put that there for you.
Yeah, and I'd like to add one more thing. When Jennifer and I do a lot of our work together, we have put on conferences in the past, and also when we work with schools and districts online, we like to be very interactive. This particular event is a little more of, let's meet David and get to know him. So it's not going to be quite as interactive, but we'll see if we can find some time towards the end to hear from you, because we really like to hear from you. And that's also, David said, if you can put your face on the screen, if you're feeling comfortable doing that, that would be great, because we connect as human beings that way. And for future events, you'll probably see more interaction than today's event. So I just wanted to have that as a little disclaimer.
All right. So officially, let's begin with the discovery of all things David Franklin and the principal's desk. To start it off, we're wondering, if people were to look you up, research you, if you had to give yourself, a couple of burger dot points of your highlights of educational experience, what would you love most for people to know about you?
That's a great question. If you were going to Google me, my name does come up as an actor on Star Trek, but it is not me. I promise you. It's like I was going to say a middle-aged man, but I am a middle-aged man, and I can't believe I just said that. But he is a little older than I am, and I believe he's British. And obviously, I'm not British. I've never been on Star Trek. I'm not an actor. But I guess kind of like the three. If I was going to pick three things about me, is that I spent 15 years in public education. And I worked in I worked in 4 schools, but mainly 3. And I kind of worked across California. And I would say one of my favorite pieces of my career was, working at a school that had a lot of challenges. It just, a lot of gangs, a lot of drugs, a lot of violence in the schools. And I would say low expectations when we got there. And I was able to kind of create a team that kind of blew it all out of the water and said, like, let's just start from scratch. And I was there for 5 years, and 5 years, old test score numbers, but we went up 105 points in 5 years. We went from a 92% attendance rate to 98. We brought in back electives. We brought in more parent involvement, and we saw disciplinary rates like really go down. And it was kind of an opportunity just to turn around a school. And in turn around a school, we had to look inwards and see what we were doing and what we need to do differently. In the past, it had all been about like, what do the kids need to do differently? What do the parents need to do differently? What does the community need to do differently? And yes, we did have those conversations, but really it came from internally inside the school. How do we meet the needs of our students and our families and our community? And that began a really great conversation that really kind of got my thinking going again about, school improvement and how do we really make change in education. I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to LA public schools. I got to see firsthand as a kid and then as an adult, as an educator, just how the system doesn't work. And we as educators really need to go in and change it up. Well, that's why we do what we do. I became a teacher to make change. I became an administrator to make change. And I still work with schools to make change. And, you were to kind of look me up, I'd love for that to be, kind of my bullet points, if you will, as far as my career goes.
So first off, congratulations for being able to affect such positive change. And Heidi and I are very passionate about strength-based leadership, strength-based introspection. We tend to feel that, especially in education, it's so easy to admire the problems and perseverate on that. And then you get really good of analyzing what goes into problems. And the fact that you were able to have that turnaround, would love to be able at some point later on to do a deeper dive into that, especially now with the pandemic where everyone is looking at learning loss and closing that opportunity gap. But one thing that I did hear from you that I'd like to ask you now is, at what point did you decide to step away from the classroom and become a principal? Because it's the principal's desk, so I'd love to know that.
So I was a teacher for 5 years, and interesting enough, I was a music teacher. Not a lot of music teachers, I think, come out of the classroom to become administrators, but I think I muted myself. I'm sorry about that. I think I had a principal who really pushed me in that direction, and he said, you can be a music teacher for the next 25, 30 years and you'll be very happy and you'll have a lot of great kids come through your program. Or you can become an administrator and affect the entire school. And I had no intention of becoming a principal, not zero. I was the happiest music teacher on the planet. I lived maybe a mile from the school. It was great. I loved it, but he kept bringing it up with me. And so I went and got back, I got my master's, and I applied everywhere in the state, and I got a couple hits, and I became an assistant principal first. And it was really, I went from a beachy town in San Diego, where it was upper middle class, to the school that I just talked about a few minutes ago in East San Jose. I wanted to change. I really wanted to make a difference, if you will. And I thought, having my music background, I was able to connect with kids in a kind of a different way than a lot of my colleagues did. I would look at the kid who was, kind of deemed as the loner, who would walk around with the hood on and had maybe a heavy metal like sweatshirt on. And I knew the name of the band, because I'd be like, yeah, I've seen him in concert, and it was legitimate. And I would be able to have a connection with that kid, where other teachers were like, oh, you don't want to talk to him, like he's a little on the scary side. But it's like, no, he's wearing I won't say some names of these bands, but like I know that band, and like, yeah, they're a little scary, but you know what? They're some really talented musicians too. And like, I dig that, and I can have a conversation with him. So that's kind of what got me going here. When I saw that I could affect change on a larger level, that's what made me kind of really excited about this. And I took that, I was there for 5 years, and I went to an elementary school that needed just a kick in the butt as far as like instructional programs and like technology, and it was stuck in like the 80s. And so I was there for 5 years, but I was able to affect change on just a larger level. And kind of every step of my career, I've done that. And that's why I went into higher ed, because it's like, well, I want to work with pre-service teachers and pre-service administrators, because they fan out to like hundreds of schools, and I can maybe be a part of those conversations as well. And so that's why I got into it. That's why I continue to do this work.
Well, I'm very grateful. And I just have to say, on a personal note, my chorus teacher, when I went up to the high school, back then it was junior high, he went up to the high school. So I had from 7th to 12th grade the same chorus teacher. And we had a choreographer come through, and I did the pan flip and classic, what was it, Glee type of situation. And that really, it saved my life. And I think that's a big reason why I'm so passionate about the community that you're creating to support students, because were it not for, my music teacher, who knows where I'd be. So yay. Thank you. Thank you for all of that. And Heidi.
Yeah, thank you so much, David and Jennifer, for asking these questions they're just bringing up so much for me, and I'm sure for our participants. I've been finding some questions in the chat. The first one was, where are people coming from? And I'm seeing people from all over: Delaware, Pennsylvania, Oregon, New York, Atlanta, California. And Arizona. And then the newest question is about what excites our participants about being in education. Like, why are they there? Because here's David sharing with us a lot of his passions. Well, you know, what drives all of you really? And for me, I'm thinking, David, when you were talking about, you know, how you wanted to always grow and support education and make change, that's exactly how I felt as a teacher. And that's what got me where I am today, doing what I do today. If you'd asked me 10 years ago if I would be doing this, I would have never thought it. You know, I was in California. I recently moved to Oregon about almost 2 years ago. So most of my teaching career has been in California. And my kids were in some phenomenal schools that were doing things differently than the traditional schools. And so I knew that it could happen, but I was always teaching in these very traditional systems that, you know, weren't going along. And I was in all sorts of schools, you know, high socioeconomic, all the way to not. I was in East Palo Alto. While you were in East San Jose, I was in East Palo Alto. So very similar feel. Yeah, so I'm wondering, and I'm excited to read some of these comments coming up in the chat as to how our audience is making that change and how excited they are to be in education. But my question for you, David, is, you know, you told us a little bit about how the principal's desk got started and what you were kind of hoping for, but what was your big vision for it? I know one time we talked about how you kind of wanted it to feel like you're sitting at your desk and your door is open. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, who do you see coming in? What kinds of activities do you see happening on this Facebook group, so on and so forth?
Yeah, so I think that originally when I created the group, it was created out of like frustration that there really wasn't a spot for the types of conversations I wanted to have. And I'm a member of a lot of different education groups on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. But I just was like, you know what, I'm gonna create my own. And I called it the Principal's Desk. I have a website also called the Principal's Desk. It's kind of when I made that transition into higher ed. And we started off with just friends that I was like, hey, can you join my group? Like, I'm just, you know, I would literally like send my friends a text, be like, join my group so I can have like 3 people in here. And it just kind of, it grew a little bit. And I remember when I got to 20,000, I was like, wow. Even my wife was like, seriously, you have 20,000 in your group? I was trying to like tell my kids too, like, look, daddy has like, like this Facebook group, and they didn't care because they follow people that have like millions and stuff. And I don't know their names, but like they're, you know, YouTube, you know, folks, and I'm not one of those. But it really kind of started booming over this past year. We have 136,000 members in the Principal's Facebook group, Principal's Desk Facebook group here. And so my goal as it grew and grew was going to have great conversations, to have a community come together where we can do virtual events kind of like this, but like on a bigger scale, bring people together, have, you know, guest speakers, have maybe even like a monthly newsletter that goes out to folks who are interested, and just kind of have that strong connection here. And the other thing that's happened over the past, I'd say 2 years or so, and there's been some chatter on, you know, in the group about this, is that like, okay, it's not just principals here, it's teachers, it's structural assistants, there are bus drivers, and like it's all educators in this group here. And I've had some people email and say like, hey, like, what is this all about? And it's like, we're all in this together. You know, I was never the whole like, well, I you know, I don't have my own parking spot at my school. Like the sign in my office it didn't say principal. I think it just had my name. I don't think we had enough money to put like a new plaque on there. So I think I Sharpied my name on something and I put it up. But we're all sharing ideas together here. And I would love for just kind of a way that we can calendar different events and get together and become this greater community, you know, that can influence education. 136,000 educators throughout the world. I would say a lot of them here in the United States. But I mean, if you think about those sheer numbers, and if we're all getting together and talking about the right things that can really, you know, make change in schools, we can actually really have a force here to change education for what we want to. We look at our political landscape, we look at our instructional landscape here. This is the group that's going to make those decisions here. And again, I look at the numbers every day, and we get about 1,000 new members every week. And it's like, we actually have a force here to make change. And that's what I kind of can see this moving forward.
Yeah, so I wonder, do you have a sense of why it's taking off so fast? I mean, you're telling us all these people every week wanting to come in. So what do you think they're gravitating towards?
You know what? I see the quality of the posts that come in and the questions that come in. And I'm not talking about mine, although I post them there all the time, as I know, I'm sure all of you can tell. But it's just the questions that come in, and I get folks who will message me on the site, say, "Hey, can you post this anonymously? Because I'm a little scared. I've got some questions I want to ask that are tough questions. I don't know if I want my name associated with it." And I'm like, I don't care. I have my name associated with all the questions. It's totally fine with me. So I think people are gravitating to the types of content that's in there, the questions that are in there. But I have people that just will message me randomly and say, like, I'm getting so much out of the group. Like I have no one to ask these questions to in my school or my district, but I'm getting the answers here in the group. So, thank you for bringing it together. And it's like, I don't think me, think the person who answered your question. I'm just here, creating the space. And I think that's why it's growing here. And, I have people that are tagging other people in there, and, it's, I just think it's just grown just organically. And it's been amazing to watch.
Yeah, and it is a really safe place. I know, I've been in a handful of schools and I haven't always felt safe with admin or with my staff. It hasn't always been a place where I can just go ask questions and say, "Hey, help me figure this out," or "I'm confused as to why this is happening. I've been in 3 other schools and this looks different. Can you tell me about it?" But the principal's desk is definitely a place where, you can ask that question and then you get a variety of responses and take what you like and leave the rest. You don't have to
Mhm.
take it all on, but whatever resonates. So it's been a great forum for everybody to really share and learn from each other and support each other. Has there been anything about the principal's desk in the time since you started it that surprised you, that you weren't quite ready for, or you weren't expecting?
The management of it has been a fun, like, learning experience, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from members in the group, which is amazing. Um, Earlier on, there was just, again, like any online social media group, there's a lot of spam that comes in. And so, learning a lot about the different Facebook tools to kind of mitigate that, and to, keep that at a very basic minimum here. But I think just the dialogue that's been in some of these conversations is really it's really deep. And we have some good discourse that's going on. Not everyone agrees with everyone in the group, which I think is great. We get some good debates going on. For the most part, everyone's very respectful. Everyone's very much like, okay, we're going to agree to disagree here. uh, you know, every once in a while, I'll do get like a ping that says, "Hey, you might want to check out this conversation, check it out." And it's, again, I want to make sure everyone's being respectful, but it's been the types of conversations. And again, Heidi, like you just said, it's a safe space. And so folks are asking the tough questions, and they're not surprised when they get the tough answers coming back here. And I think it's great. I remember as a principal, especially at the elementary level, and it's something that my mentor said to me, and you never really experience it until you get in that seat. He's like, when you're a teacher, for the most part, you can turn to an instructional coach, one of your peers, or an administrator for help. And I remember doing this a lot when I was a teacher, right? And I asked a lot of questions. I needed a lot of help as a teacher. When I became a principal, I remember what he told me. He said, look around. Who are you going to ask at your school site? There's no one behind you. There's no you're it at the school site. And no, district offices, just they work a little differently. And so having, again, a space like this where folks can ask those questions, I think is really helpful. I would have used a tool like this. Facebook, it didn't exist at that middle school, but at the elementary school it did. But I was actually one of those administrators and educators who I stayed off a lot of social media at the time, but really embraced it towards the end of my career. But again, it's that safe space that I think is just gravitated people to the group.
Yeah, and Christopher Holmes said in the chat that you don't have to be an expert there. Like you can just kind of
Right.
show up as you, the principal, and not have to know
Yeah.
everything. And you can hear from others. I mean, I've been in some other groups, not on Facebook, but just like here in Oregon, I've been on Oregon groups for principals where they literally get together and just share ideas. And nobody's necessarily saying, buy this, buy that. It's just they're getting together and saying, hey, it's like a community of practice, like here's what we've done. And that's just great because you don't have to be an expert. You can try it together. You can be vulnerable together. You can share together. So my last question about the principal's desk, about this Facebook group, is what are your goals moving forward? Like, what are your hopes or visions for what you see happening in the next year to 5 years for the principal?
Yeah, I've touched a little bit on it already, but I think, again, just a regular space that we can all come to. A monthly kind of meetup like this, then maybe we do something, maybe it is more often, and the topics change week to week, and folks can drop in just to be a part of the conversation. Again, I think of like a newsletter that, education newsletter that really speaks to, again, the volume of the group and the topics that we discuss that can go out to everyone, say, on a monthly basis. One thing that I'm really excited about, and Heidi and Jennifer and I have been talking about this a lot, is maybe, we're looking at late spring, early summer here for, potentially having a virtual conference. And I've already started to speak with some folks who, I don't want to say their names, but if I did, you would know who they are. And they've, we've had some preliminary conversation about them, doing an event like this. And so, again, think about doing that 2 to 3 times a year and having that virtual space where, again, we can come together as educators. I've embraced the whole, the virtual learning piece as well. We can get together from all over the world and be in one spot. Something that does excite me down the road, if we could, an in-person event would be absolutely amazing. That's going to be way down the road. You talked about, 5 years down the road, maybe sooner than that. But having these virtual events, I think, would be really exciting. Being able to bring in folks who, again, based off of like feedback that folks in the group are giving me. And we did put some feelers out there about what type of topics would you like here. There was a Google form that went out like a month or 2 ago and got some really great feedback. Again, we want to create a conference for everyone in the group. It's not my conference. These are not things that I'm interested in, but these are things you want to hear about as group members. And that's what we want to bring. And that's exciting to me. I think that's, again, I would have loved this, type of environment when I was a principal, and that's what I'd love to offer this group.
Yeah, and that's a huge point of having, everybody involved having a voice and being able to hear from everybody and building it together, co-creating together. That's some of what Jennifer and I do when we consult for schools and districts. That's what we work on, is to really bring all voices, all stakeholders in, and be able to customize and build and grow together. Jen, would you like to talk a little more about that?
Oh, you know me so well. Thank you. So I think it's only fair that people know a little bit about us because as we're starting to, we engage in the principal's desk a lot. And now it has that little moniker there of admin. And it's like, well, who are they to be, admin to be able to have that honor to engage in a different way. And so basically, so people know a little bit about us. This is my 22nd year in the classroom. I've been teaching since 2000, all in Pennsylvania. And once I had my own daughter and was learning about, why is it that I'm kissing her so much and doing all these things? And I started going into trauma-informed practices, and I wrote a children's book, and I took a sabbatical, and I got certified out of Baltimore in trauma responsive practices. And one thing led to another, and I got this thing called Appreciative Inquiry Facilitator certification. And that is when everything opened up for me, where all my hopes and aspirations for education, where students have voice, teachers are able to have voice. We come together and co-create what we want and how we can push the needle in a direction that we can all be on board for. That's called appreciative inquiry. And then Heidi and I met because through my training in Baltimore, this one gentleman was involved with Head Start programming, online conferences, or not online, it was actually in South Dakota. He was speaking at a conference, and the pandemic hit, and they were going to cancel the conference. And they said, he actually recommended me to them, saying, hey, I think Jennifer and what she does is able to do things for them. And Heidi and I, Heidi, you can speak when you introduce some of your work on how we met. But the whole thing where you mentioned, David, about doing things online, the pandemic really launched our educational consulting. And then I decided to finish up my admin degree. And I come to the principal's desk because I'll be taking my praxis shortly. Also, I just told you that I decided, why not? Let's just throw a supervisory certificate on top of that, because I really believe in having that path for leadership where you're in the classroom, you deepen your professional development, and then you're able to share that and have that larger impact. So the fact that you said, oh, maybe 5 years from now we can do in person, I have a feeling that it would be a lot sooner, because we went in that one direction and now we're going in the other direction because we're helping schools to recover from the pandemic. And maybe that's a great time to pass it off to you, Heidi, to like talk about some of the most recent stuff that we've been doing face to face as well.
Yeah, it's been really fun to get back in person, like you said, David. Can't wait till we get there, right? When we're working with people. So Jennifer and I have had the chance to work with a few in just this month, even here in Oregon, live in person. So that's been great. Yeah, I mean, I came from a background of educators. Both my parents were teachers, and so were like all of my friends' parents. So it was kind of just what I always knew. And I got into the classroom because I didn't want to do what my parents did, which is kind of funny. But I really wanted to support children in having the tools that they needed to grow up and do life. And not just the academic tools, but the social and the emotional skills as well. Because I really struggled growing up with my own social and emotional. I was a very shy kid. I had some bouts of depression in high school and in my early 20s. And I really needed tools, and my parents didn't have the tools. They were loving, kind people, but they didn't know how to teach me what I needed. And so I self-taught in the sense of, I looked for answers and found them and thought, well, why aren't children learning this in school? It's part of what they need. And then as I became a teacher, I started in 1999, around the same time as Jen, and I started 3rd and 4th grade. I found the more I focused on the social and emotional, the higher the academic went up, right? It was a lot easier to maintain the classroom. I don't like to say classroom management, but it was just easier to really get into what they needed to be doing. And so that's been my wheelhouse ever since, is the social and emotional piece. And, I went deep into mindfulness practices and all sorts of other curriculum. So when I met Jen, I was jumping out of the classroom to work on bringing this kind of culture and climate to schools. And I had a piece that was missing, that appreciative inquiry piece that she was talking about. And so I hooked up with a friend of mine who was in California, and she was already partnering with Jen. And so that's how I met Jennifer. And from there, the pandemic hit right away, and we went into our conferences. And today we've shifted back into really diving into schools and supporting their culture and their climate through listening to all stakeholders, through finding what their needs are today, right now, and then building in what they're already doing that's successful and how to grow that and improve it and make it even more successful. And we incorporate social and emotional practices in there. And so that's kind of my big thing, is to shift that culture so that that each school becomes a safe place as well. Just like the principal's desk is feeling very safe. I want schools to feel that way for students, for staff, for admin, for families, and everyone, so that they can thrive.
So David, wondering, as far as you and your career as a teacher and, music teacher, and doing your administrative roles and being a principal, wondering, you had done a lot of writing, a lot of blogging about different topics. I'm wondering what you've noticed from pre-pandemic and going through to the pandemic, because your
Mhm.
Facebook group has grown through the pandemic. And I'm just wondering what you might want to speak to about before, during, and after the pandemic
Yeah.
as an administrator.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the group. It speaks to what I've written about, and it also speaks to when I go and work with districts. It's what they ask as well. And I would say before pre-pandemic, I was very data-driven focus. I was that principal that had the massive data wall in the staff room. My office wall wasn't big enough, and I would move the cards around myself. I'd be in there all day long. I love that stuff. Not because I want to identify kids with a number, but because always was interested on a weekly basis. Are we moving our students forward? Are they pausing? Are they regressing? I always like to know. I'm a big proponent of formative assessment and that inquiry piece, that cycle of inquiry. Pandemic hit, and that all just stopped. I have two children. Right now, they're 11 and 13. I watched that pandemic just absolutely change them. I mean, my kids are changed for probably, my little one especially, probably forever. I think we forget that this is like, for kids that age, like pre-pandemic is a really long time ago, and for our little ones, they don't remember a time when they weren't wearing masks in school, or just things were different. So when I right now, or when I get called out to districts, it's a lot of social emotional learning components. It's a lot of, let's make sure our kids are okay. Let's make sure our teachers are okay. And that's a lot of the writing that I've done as well. I partnered up with another organization. We wrote the Teachers on the Brink article that came out a little while ago. I've written an SCL article about, who's taking care of your teachers and your staff here. We talk a lot about kids, which is great. But as a principal, it's like, I want to take care of my teachers as well. And that's something that was always really important to me pre-pandemic. When I was a principal, I was the principal with the coffee cart who would go to Starbucks and I'd get the two big things, and I would cruise around with the coffee cart. And it was to a two-pronged approach. Number one, I'm serving coffee to my teachers, which is, no one wants to turn that down if you're a coffee drinker, and I'm a huge coffee drinker. But I'm also, then I get to peek in all my classrooms that morning as well. It's kind of like a double-edged thing for me. It's like I get to be in all the classrooms, and I'm giving everyone coffee, which is great too. But it's a lot of, how do we make sure we're all okay? And I see the posts coming through our group as well here. And it's just, the issues right now with substitute teachers, with staffing, with, how do we keep our staff with us? How do we keep our staff coming in every day? It's so hard. And that's what I get brought in. It's a lot of like more school culture, social emotional learning components. Now, I do think, as we, progress, we're going to get more into that. We're going to fold in the instructional piece. That's going to come back again. I know it never went away, but I think our focus has been something else. And I think it should be on that social emotional learning piece right now. But I see that never really disappearing either. Just that focus on making sure we're all okay. Because I do see people in our group, break down in posts. I see it on a daily basis. Like, today was a really tough day, and then they just list out everything they had to do. I had 12 teachers out. I had 3 teachers crying. She's like, I cried in my office at the end of the day. I mean, so I see it. When I get private messaged on things, I get asked all the time, like, how do you keep a staff together? And so it's challenging. My heart definitely goes out to folks that are in schools, doing this on the ground floor level here. It's really been a challenging couple of years, and I think those challenges are going to continue. And that's why I think it's important to have a group like this, so that we can come together and be as one. And again, 136,000 folks, we can change the educational landscape. If we come together, we can really influence true change.
So in that word of change, you ended your thought with change, and we've seen change in the chat a lot, and wondering, as far as the change with the pandemic, and we've seen change all the time with initiatives come and go from central administration, or maybe through educational policy, through different administrations at the national level, politically. What could you give people, like, just a takeaway, a nugget of wisdom on how to navigate change for yourself, for your students, for your staff, for their families?
It's a great question. And I think it's important to note too, that we have a lot of superintendents in the principal staff Facebook group. We do have a lot of district office administrators. We also do have some policymakers in the group as well. I've actually have a couple folks, in a variety of different states reach out to me, and we do have like some Congress members of Congress in the group. There are representatives in the group, which is amazing. I think what folks that are on those kind of upper leadership tier levels need to understand is what is really happening on, at schools. That was always really important to me as a principal. When I advocated for my kids, when I advocated for my teachers and my school and my staff, it was more like, this is what I walked into today. And it's those like narrative stories of, walking in. It's like I had 12 teachers out today, and this is how we solved the problem. So we're also kind of sharing out what we're doing about it, because we all do come together. We're not just kind of complaining about it, but we're sharing like, these are the real issues that are going on here. And we're coming a way of like, we want to work collaboratively with folks in a variety of different ways that we can work to better our education system, because the people that are going to be truly affected by this are the kids at the end of the day. And again, I look at my own children, and I see, through the pandemic and through all these changes, I can see that both my kids fell through the cracks a little bit. It's no one's fault. It's just life happened. I mean, this whole thing happened. And again, my kids are now, especially my little one, are different probably forever over it. I think I've changed over it as well. I think we all have, but it's having those dialogues and having those conversations. And again, in a group like this, we can do that of like, this is what's really happening. These are the real problems that we're facing at school sites, as school leaders, as teachers. And as we have like superintendents in the group, we have district level administrators in the group, or policymakers in the group, we have these conversations. And maybe that's something like further down the road, as we look at like our conference, we can bring in someone who could say, again, a policymaker, and say like, look, like we're going to have a couple thousand educators here in this virtual conference. It'd be great if you were there. Like you can hear their voice, and we can again have that positive forum where again, we can really affect change. And I think there are a lot of policymakers out there and superintendents out there that really do want to listen. They do want to make a difference. Politically, internally gets really hard though. I actually had a superintendent who's in our group reach out to me yesterday. And he's like, I'm looking for this. Do you have this? And I can't ask for anyone internally. It's like, I don't want them to know that I'm headed in this direction. And so I'm working with him on trying to get him what he needs. But again, like this safe space here, I think is really important, that we can bounce off these different ideas.
So I'm glad you mentioned the vibrancy and the diversity of different people in the principal's desk. And you had mentioned the conference, and, a little bit of a teaser where, we are going to be doing this monthly up until the conference. And this is going to be that platform. And we'll be putting the dates on when people can mark these on the calendar, because as you mentioned, this is a co-created conference. What topics do people want? And then, we'll be progressing this, because we've done conferences in the past, Heidi and I, call for presenters, what are the topics, and to create some of those engagement pieces on the principal's desk so that we are providing exactly what people need. And what's great about doing that in this format is it's organic, it's in real time. Sometimes people plan conferences for a year, and by the time the conference happens, the original concept has been locked in, and then it's not maybe relevant anymore. So we're able to be very fluid and flexible with that. So people can stay tuned with that and to continue to engage. Heidi.
Yeah, I just put the next two live Facebook events in the chat. April 24th is the next time that you'll see us on here. And then May 22nd, you'll see us again. So, and that's just pre-conference time. And David, I love that you talked about change and knowing that we have this group, because for a lot of people, the word change is a 4-letter word. They don't like to hear it. They don't want it, and yet it's inevitable. Change is happening in every second, at every moment. And then things like the pandemic happen, and you can't avoid that. So to know that we have a place to come together and support each other through change, and then sometimes making change intentionally, to grow and to be positive. We've been on here for about 45 minutes, which is awesome. And we're getting close to wrapping up. But I would love to hear from anyone who's joined us here on Zoom, or the 4 people that we have on the Facebook Live. You can type in the comments. And if you have any questions for us, specifically for David, we'd love to hear your questions. If you're here in Zoom, you can just unmute and ask your question in person if you're comfortable, or you can go into the chat for that. But we'd love to hear from you all.
I'd like to address something that's actually in the chat real quick while maybe folks are formulating questions. Actually, Jen, it's something that you, I guess, tagged from Facebook Live. From Meg says, all living systems must adapt or die. And that's really funny, because one of my posts, that it was one of my original posts I wrote probably about 5 years ago. It says kind of just that. And there's a t-shirt, gosh, I'm going back many years here. There's a t-shirt that I saw once that it was like a dinosaur. There's a dinosaur on the shirt that says, like evolve. I think it's like evolve, or die, basically. And we all know what happened to the dinosaurs. And education is just that too. And the frustrating thing, I think, in education is that we've all been saying this for a really long time. Like, things need to change, and we're the change makers. And so I'm just really looking forward to, our future dialogues and saying, hey, like, we have a really big group, we have a really big voice, let's do something with it. Let's evolve the system. So thanks, Meg, for that comment down there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. She's an organizational development expert, and she's very connected to nature, and does a lot of work with song cycles with Aboriginal people in Australia. She's very powerful. I got a chance to meet her. So I'm wondering at this time if anybody would like to come off of mute, and what about the time that we've spent together with David and talking about the principal's desk, what has excited you the most or inspired you the most as the role that you play within education? Would there be someone who would like to take a moment and unmute and reflect back to David about that? We always take the nice wait time.
I can say I'm right now 17 years into my teaching career, and I'm in an internship to become an administrator, because I never thought I could. I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'll just stay a teacher forever. And then I had an administrator that really showed me, that you can, I could do it. She was one of those that builds you up, and taps into the strengths that you have. And she said, absolutely, you can do this. You absolutely should try and get it done. So I have to say, listening to your stories of being in the admin at the admin level is inspiring. And I'm actually looking very much forward to getting my feet wet in that new aspect of my career.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I loved being a principal. I really did. I look back at that decade, and I could think of all the things that I did with others, with my teams, and just a lot of really hard work. I like to say a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and there were tears. I lost kids. I went to funerals. I unfortunately, I was on a first name basis with CPS sometimes, and had to deal with that. But I will say this, and again, like I spent 5 years at this kind of, this school that just, it needed a big change here. I will say this, and I won't say his name, but it was a student of mine, drove me insane. It drove everyone insane. I mean, I can picture his face. I know his name. I know his first, his last name. Like I talked to him yesterday. I have not talked to him in a very long time, but I mean, he's a kid. He got in a lot of fights. He just very disruptive. I will say his mom was wonderful, and she was grasping at things too. She was really looking for help as well here, and I was following ed code, and he did get suspended a number of times, but at the same time, I said, okay, after your suspension, you come right back to my office. I want to see you 8 o'clock, Wednesday morning. You're right here with me, because I want to have a nice check-in with you. We're going to get you off and have a good Wednesday. Him and I, we battled it out for 2 years. I think he was a 7th grader when I got there. I heard that he had dropped out of high school year or two after he left my middle school here. But I got an email from him a few years after that, and he said, you know what? I went back, I got my GED, and now I'm enrolled in San Jose State. And I want to thank you for, never giving up on me, basically. And so I messaged him back, and I said, I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad that you figured it out, and it was tough love, a lot of the time, but they got there. And so sometimes the reward comes a lot later. Like I said, we deal with a lot of things, and it's the things that stick out are not the GPAs of all the kids. It's the kid like that'll stick with you forever. I will remember this kid's name for the rest of my life here. And I use his story a lot in the college courses I teach. And then when I go and I work with districts, I'm like, you're going to get that email 5-10 years from now. Or now it's you'll get hit up on Facebook or Instagram, they'll find you. And that's what makes it all worth it. And as a classroom teacher, I was able to do it with my group of kids, but as a principal, it was 800 kids that I got to interact with and be a part of. So you can do it, and you will do it. And I look forward to hearing from you when it happens.
Yeah, best wishes to you, Teresa.
And Teresa, I don't know if you caught that I'm doing my practicum and I have my mentorship. And so I'm even wondering too, that could be something that we have as a track within the conference is aspiring, rising administrators.
Yeah, I've thought about that, because actually a lot of sometimes my posts that have to do with aspiring administrators, I can kind of tell they're getting probably a lot more traction sometimes than others. And so I was also thinking of a live group like this as well, aspiring administrators that can come together and get kind of group support and sometimes some group therapy as we all kind of step in these roles as well. I remember my first year as administrator as an AP was something else. And again, I had a great principal, and she was someone who I could talk to all the time, but it would have been great to have other people that I just met like this, be let me tell you what happened today, and then just have that safe space to kind of share out. So a lot of different possibilities here that I can see being really helpful to so many.
Well, and that the whole, oh my gosh, they're going to the dark side. Right. And what happens behind the scenes of an administrator. And I think there's a lot of, and this is my big passion too, is when people are so siloed, teachers, administrators, parents, and we only have that one narrative. And so we fill in other people's narratives. We just fill in the blank and we make things up that maybe aren't true. And to be able to create that type of space here, I think is really unique, where having discussions across that desk, because you were talking about that, right, David, as far as what happens on both sides of the principal's desk. And I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about school administrators that's out there. You do go to the dark side, and for some reason, automatically in a lot of schools becomes an us versus them thing. Automatically, you're hate to say it, sometimes anti-teacher, and that's I always consider myself a teacher. I still do, and that was very difficult for me stepping in that new role when I was met with some of that animosity kind of right off the bat. These are people I had never met them before, but I could automatically tell they were standoffish with me, and I worked very hard with them to say we're on the same page, we're on the same team here. I want to work with you. I want to support you and help you do the best job you can do. You're the ones with the kids, not me. And so that's how I always approach it. What can I do to help make your life easier? And sometimes it was dealing with, some difficult disciplinary cases. And sometimes it was delivering coffee. Sometimes it was, changing around some school procedures that like were antiquated. The teachers were like, why do we still do this? And I'm like, well, how come you didn't change it? And they're looking at me going like, we don't know. I'm like, let's change it. This is our school. Like, it was just having those conversations. And so like, it's making everyone feel like we're the same team. I play a role, you play a role, but we're the same team. And for some schools, it's very entrenched that it's an us versus them thing. And I worked at one of those. But when time I left, I feel like I'd blown that up. And some hard conversations had to happen in there, but I think everyone was better off. And again, at the end of the day, as I look at how the kids were at that school, it was a much better school when I left than when I got there. And it wasn't because of me, it was because of all of us. We changed our mindsets, and the kids were the ones that benefited from it.
So as we're coming to a close, I'm wondering if there's anyone else who would like to speak up and either make a comment or ask another question before we close out for the evening.
It's funny when I do some of my work for Robert Marzano, like wait time is something we talk about all the time, and online it's so much harder. We're just like, okay, who's gonna talk? But
7 seconds, right?
we
Great
do
opportunity for mindfulness.
Yeah. I teach the 3 and 3. It's like you ask the question, you wait 3, you get the response, and then you wait 3 before you ask the follow-up. So you've got like the bookend wait time on there.
All right, well, it seems like we're pretty quiet today. We'll be back on the Principal's Desk Live on April 24th, and we have a different focus on April 24th, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head what it is. Jennifer, do you remember exactly what it is, or should we announce it later?
I want to say that it's talking more specifically about the vision for the conference, and to start to get that conversation going as far as topics. And if we have conversations on Zoom here where people maybe can come and bring the questions, bring concerns, and even to realize that through the principal's desk, looking at themes, like one person said today, and it was amazing, PBIS is a repeated thing, restorative practices, PBIS, right? So to start to think about between now and the next time we're together, these themes that are really blowing up the principal's desk, right? These big hot topics, and to be starting to set that scene and leave people with an opportunity to give us more feedback about that. What would you want to know about? What would you like to speak about if you were to be a presenter? And so that's, I believe, the direction we were taking, unless David, I see you shaking your head. Do you have something else?
I think that's great. I want to be cognizant of the fact that this conference is going to be co-created by everyone in the group. And I think that's, and I just spoke at 2 conferences, and and it's funny because now that I go to conferences, I look at like, well, how are these put together? And I never got to say, I got to say what I talked about, but I don't know if anybody else really cared all that much. I mean, they did, because I had good sized rooms, and people seemed to be pretty interested. But at the same time, it's like, I know how these conferences get put together, and we never really ask the greater good. And I want to make sure that we're doing that. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we had that Google form that went out, and we had like 150 responses to it, which is great. And so I'm going to get that out a little bit more in the group. But no, if we come back next month and we can talk about this more and more, and maybe I'll have a couple announcements as to maybe a couple people that might have already agreed to speak at it, which would be amazing. So we'll see.
Maybe we can post that, just right after this, so that those who were here.
I will get it out. Yeah.
And then we'll post it again, maybe a week prior to April 24th, our next live event.
That sounds good.
And I want to thank everyone for coming out today and spending time with David and Jennifer and myself. It's been great to hear from you and chat and and in person. It's been great to see some faces too. And David, thank you so much for taking the time, and we get to see you and hear you. I mean, we've been following you for a while, but now to see you and hear you is
Wow.
so much fun.
It is great to see the names here and some faces here while they were up, you know, when you could. And so it's great. I think this is the first of many things to come here, and I'm really excited about what the future is going to be offering us here with this group.
All right, and we'll close it out with that. Jen, do you have any last words to say goodbye?
The end of the marking period at my school is this week, end of the third marking period, home stretch. And I will say this is words matter. And, you know, I caught myself saying, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I can do this. You know, I feel like it's a marathon and I'm dropping off at the final half a mile. And then I said, Jen, come on, like, you know that you should not be saying that. And as soon as I said, I can't wait for Monday, I'm getting that much closer to clearing out the year. I can't wait to do those assignments, to finish up my grad class. Like, all of a sudden, like, as soon as I said that, I believed it, and it just breathed new life. So that's my thing, is I hope people can say, you know, bring on Monday. I can't wait to have another great week.
All right, bye everyone.